Greetings, my dear ladies and gentlemen. This is, of course, your favorite Shogun here, Sugi, and today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Netflix original anime series Tekken Bloodline that came out today, and this is obviously based on the Tekken fighting game franchise that started its roots back in PS1, and I remember having Tekken 2 and 3, and I did spend fair amount playing those two games, and I was never really super into fighting games, but these were games that I kind of enjoyed, and they really had a pretty good graphics for their time too, and that was probably one of the contributing factors why it became so successful and also became this very known fighting game franchise, and has lasted through multiple consoles and generations, so it's an impressive feat. Not a lot of games have done that. Now, Tekken Bloodline is not exactly like adapting any of the previous game's storylines. I kind of, in a lot of ways, it uses some existing plot lines, but kind of is its own storyline at the same time. And to be honest, Tekken was never really known for its storyline, so in a lot of ways, I kind of see this as a bit of a promotional piece to kind of promote the Tekken games out there, instead of like being, respectable individual, like an anime that can stand on its 2 feet without being associated with Tekken. And I mean, I think probably the best way to look at this anime is as a form of fan service. Now, let's kind of explain a bit about the premise. What exactly is this story about? So, this focuses on Jin Kazama, who is, learned family self-defense arts from his mother, and they are like literally somewhere in the boonies in Japan, and kind of away from civilization, and they're training there, and the mother is telling Jin, you can't be hostile, you can't be aggressive, you have to do this self-defense stuff and whatever. And one day basically this monster appears known as the ogre and basically destroys their house and kills Jin's mother, and then he goes into a quest to basically get a revenge. And on her last words, her mother told Jin, you gotta meet Heihachi because this is your grandfather and he's gonna teach you a bunch of shit. And then he goes with the Heihachi, train, and then there's gonna be this tournament, which is the the end of all events basically in this anime. Now, it's a 6-episode story, so it's not exactly like a story that has that much like character development or dialogue or fan service. Most of it is really training and fighting in a lot of ways, so it doesn't really have that same amount of like dialogue and background stories as Baki or Kengan Ashura has, which are another 2 very, very good fighting-based anime that you can find on Netflix that I really recommend in case you enjoyed Tekken Bloodline. And I think those 2 shows do a lot better job, and we're going to be getting into that later. But fundamentally, that's kind of like the plot. It's not like super bad or anything. It's pretty average at best, but and then pretty straightforward too. There's not exactly like multitude of twists or anything, but Tekken was never really known from its like massive storylines or something, because on each game they kind of changed the background stories of the characters, and some of them, not all of them, but fundamentally like it was never a game that I viewed, oh, Tekken has such an interesting world or anything. I think there are some other fighting games which might have done a bit better job at that, to be honest. Now, when it comes to actually the animation and everything, so as I said, a lot of the things that actually take place is actual fighting, and there are a lot of interesting artistic choices here. So first of all, like there's a lot of shell shade graphics, so it's like there's 2D art and then there's 3D models at the same time, and they have this very weird lighting shadow on the hairs of the characters. And honestly, looking at some of the promotional pictures and just pausing the anime at certain points, it doesn't actually look very good and looks kind of weird when you start to pay attention to it. It kind of makes sense if your eyes are not really focusing on them, but as I have now told you about this, you're probably going to be paying attention to that detail, and you're going to be thinking, oh well, that kind of does look kind of weird. So that was kind of the biggest thing that I didn't like about this art direction. And the other thing is that in the actual games, when they do these attacks, there are these sort of like light effects. It's not exactly magic, but like these are like weird symbols, chakras of sorts, which like manifest when they attack characters, and they kind of implemented some of that stuff and these blocking effects as well, and they kind of uh, they kind of looked weird. I mean, I understand, you kind of wanted to be playing respects to the Tekken franchise here. So yeah, that was cool that you did that. But I don't think it really worked out really that well. Some hardcore Tekken fans, did you appreciate that? Did you not? Let me know in the comments. Now, then let's talk about the characters. So there are a lot of these characters making appearances. As I've said, I'm not a super expert here, but there are definitely characters that were not in the third game. So these are some newer characters and some older characters. You have Heihachi, you have Kazama Jun, Phoenix Paul, Williams Nina, Ling Xiao, Gunru, and some others like King, obviously. And so a lot of like popular characters, but one of the more popular characters were really only made cameos, one being Law, and maybe there's some legal disputes here because he's obviously based on Bruce Lee, but he is one of the most popular characters in the franchise according to polls and a lot of the things. And Yoshimitsu is another one. I think Yoshimitsu is actually very iconic Tekken character, and I mean, he did make an appearance on Soul Calibur if I remember right, so that was you wouldn't put out just a random character in Soul Calibur. Like Heihachi and Yoshimitsu are kind of like go Tekken characters, one of the most iconic characters. And Yoshimitsu would have been very cool, interesting character to add. As I said earlier, like I did watch a video a while back, and his background stories have changed quite widely, and they're very different on each iteration, and also he looks fundamentally very different on all of the games that he has basically been. But he is fundamentally interesting character, which I probably wish that they would have added in the actual anime. Now, as I already alluded, there is a tournament arc which starts on, I think, on the third or the fourth episode. And the problem with tournament arcs. Now, let's go back into that comparison point of Baki and Kengan Ashura. Now, these two shows fundamentally play a lot around, tournaments. Now, in order to make a tournament very interesting from the viewer's perspective is to show these other matches where the main character, in this case Jin, is not actually fighting, because those are the fights which you can't exactly tell who's going to be winning. So there's a bit of stakes here. Every time Jin is fighting, or in any other anime, you'll always know that the main character is going to win. In some instances, he might lose once in the tournament, if it's like a double elimination or something bullshit. And there's some other things, like, let's say Shaman King, okay, they kind of lose, or they withdraw from the tournament. But fundamentally, like, tournaments are really bad storytelling format in case you're not going to be exploring the side characters. And I think Tekken does a really bad job at this. In Baki, they show all the matches basically. They may not be equal in length, but they build these background stories between all of these characters in Baki, and that's what makes that anime so good. And even in Kengan Ashura, they show some of the side matches here for the side characters. You care about them. Now, they had, I believe, 2 different fights that they showed, one with Nina Williams and Ling, and I think there was also a match between Ling and King. But like, fundamentally, we could have seen so much of those other fights and build up a lot of these other characters. Like, they were extremely sidelined, like Hwoarang and Ling were kind of like friends kind of with Jin, but those were also like weird because they were shown in a training montage. There was no scene where these characters basically met and they were introduced to each other, which was kind of silly in my opinion too. So like, a lot of the fundamental character development on all of the side characters is pretty abysmal. Only thing that the story really takes focus on is kind of on the ogre and Jin and Heihachi. Now, there's a very open-ended ending to this anime, and we don't know if that's going to be alluding for additional season. Usually when Netflix orders anime in general, they order 12 episodes and then they break it down in half like they just did now. And so I'm of the belief that there are additional 6 episodes in the existence, but then again, it was kind of open-ended ending, and it wouldn't be exactly a crime or anything to end the anime here. But I wouldn't argue that, oh, that was such a great ending. No, definitely not. So it's hard to say whatever there's going to be additional season, which could explore a bit more the character relationships between Mishima, Kazuya, and Jin. I mean, there is, some open doors here to explore some of the characters, but I'm not like expecting that the part 2 would fix this anime's fundamental problems in terms of storytelling and just being interesting. And the fights were kind of underwhelming. I don't think in any point that I thought any of the fights could match up some of the basic fights in Baki or Gengan Ashura, for instance. So check those fighting animes out. I think they do a much better job. But it's also interesting that Netflix takes such a focus on these fighting-based anime. I think they want to do manly content. I don't know what exactly is the goal here, but they seem to have a very deep focus on that. But I don't really have much else to add here. Obviously, there are a lot of other 3D CGI anime movies, at least one made out of Tekken. Then there was at least one OVA. And those might be things I might visit. They don't have the most amazing ratings out there, but it would be interesting to watch them in terms of comparison and kind of feel like, okay, how these are good. And obviously there has been other adaptations. I think Guilty Gear has made its own anime adaptation, but I remember watching like one episode of that and it was pretty bad. So it's not a genre like, people do these to cross-promote their games usually, but whatever. It wasn't like mega bad or anything, but it was not very interesting, to be honest, guys, even though I kind of know already a bit of the Tekken lore and everything, and there are ways to make things interesting from the original source material that has been done before, from games, from novels, etc. And hopefully, there will be lessons taken from this anime. But let me know what you thought about Tekken on the comment section below. I will be seeing you probably tomorrow with a movie review, but thanks for watching. I will be seeing you next time.